The one with the nap partners is the 6th episode of the 7th season of Friends. This is directed by Gary Halvorson, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts, and as is usually the case, it's a solid episode. I think I mentioned this recently, but I'm really loving rewatching season 7. Before I started doing the Friends reviews, well, I started doing them back in 2010, but before I started doing them more frequently, I don't know which my favourite season would have been, but I think it's safe to say that it's at least season 7. We'll see how it goes with the last few seasons and whether rewatching those episodes in order for the first time in quite a while changes my mind. But this episode, really enjoyable. There are 3 parts to the narrative, and I'll talk about each of them in turn. I will talk about Joey and Ross first, then Monica and Chandler, and then Rachel and Phoebe. Joey, Ross and Chandler, at the beginning of the film, are watching Die Hard, and every time I hear the name John McLean, all I can hear is Ross saying, John McLean had plans, which I absolutely love. And Chandler has something to do, so Ross and Joey stay and watch Die Hard again, and the next thing we see is the pair of them waking up from a nap, cuddling, lying down on the sofa. And of course, as soon as they both realise this, they pull away and they don't want to talk about this. But then Joey reveals that it was the best nap he ever had. And eventually Ross admits the same thing. And Joey keeps trying to get Ross to have another nap. Will he do it? Well, the last thing we see with this part of the narrative, in fact, the last thing in the episode, is Joey and Ross waking up from another nap in Joey's apartment this time, and everybody else is staring at them. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good part of the narrative. We then come to Chandler and Monica, and this actually starts at the beginning of the episode when Monica is at brunch with Rachel and Phoebe. I'll talk about that in a moment. And somebody overhears that she's marrying Chandler Bing. And this woman walks up to her and says, good luck. Not in a very supportive way, but in a way that kind of suggested Monica's going to need luck. And Monica asks Chandler about this, and Chandler gets out this photo album, and it is a bit of a concern how quickly he was able to turn to the right page in the photo album, but nevertheless, he shows Monica this picture, and it turns out that it was a woman called Julie Graff. She's played by Stacy Galina, and she was Chandler's camp girlfriend for 2 summers, and on the 3rd summer, she came back, and Chandler broke it up with her because she'd gotten, in Chandler's words, really fat, which is, of course, not what anybody wants to hear, but specifically not Monica, who's had problems with her weight in the past. And Chandler, for the most part, handled it well in this episode, and I'll talk about what happens in a moment. But the elephants never forget joke was maybe a step too far. And as Chandler says, he was 15, this was a long time ago. Of course he's not going to break it off with Monica if she gains weight or loses weight or anything. But Monica would feel better if Chandler apologised to Julie. So they go to her house, and he says, I'm sorry for breaking up with you because you gained weight. And she didn't know that's why he broke it off with her. But to be honest, I'm not surprised that she didn't know that. Unless maybe she'd pressed him for an explanation, but I can't imagine he would have said, oh, by the way, I'm dumping you because you've gained weight. So it's not a complete surprise that she didn't know, but it's definitely not what you want to hear years after the fact. Maybe she did want to hear, maybe she always wondered why, and now I guess she has an explanation, as unpleasant as it is. And then this narrative concludes with Chandler honestly saying all of the right things to Monica. And it was really lovely and really sweet, and I've never doubted this, but it's very, very clear that Chandler loves Monica. As I said, I've never doubted it, but whenever he talks with Monica, he seems to light up, and it's so, so beautiful, and that scene towards the end there was no exception. And then we come to Phoebe and Rachel. Monica took them to brunch because she wants to ask somebody to be her maid of honour, and she suggested they come up with a trade system where one's maid of honour to one person, the other one's maid of honour to the next person when they get married. And Rachel and Phoebe think this is a good idea, but they have to decide who's going to be Monica's maid of honour. I'll be honest, if I were Monica, I would have had 2. So I feel like she could have just had 2 maids of honour. But nevertheless, they have to decide, and Phoebe tells Rachel that she's never been maid of honour, and Rachel says, okay, well, since you've never been maid of honour, you can be Monica's. But then Joey happens to let it slip that Phoebe had been maid of honour, so Joey and Ross give Phoebe and Rachel some hypothetical situations to see how they'd handle them and to see how good they would be as maid of honour. Ross's drunk uncle impression was brilliant. Rachel's joke about Chandler behaving like a 6-year-old I loved. And then Rachel's speech was actually really beautiful. To say that she came up with that on the spot, that's absolutely wonderful. And quite rightly, she should have won there and then. But then Phoebe told a shower story and she was back in the game. And ultimately, Phoebe wins, which I think is quite surprising. Yes, she got points for the shower story, but I feel like Rachel should have won nevertheless. Maybe we didn't see all of the scenarios, so maybe there were some things where Phoebe performed better. And Rachel says, fine, you win. She tosses a coin. Phoebe wins again. She holds her hands up and lets Phoebe do it. And there's this really moving scene. It's very moving and then it's very funny, where Rachel gives Phoebe all of these things that she'd collected over the years for Monica's wedding. And she'd clearly put a lot of thought into this for a very long time. And Phoebe realises this means more to Rachel. So she lets Rachel be her maid of honour. And I love the fact that when Monica came into Central Perk, Phoebe was the one who told Monica it's going to be Rachel. So it wasn't like Rachel just suddenly started gloating and saying, I'm going to be the maid of honour. It was Phoebe who told Monica, and ultimately Phoebe who made that decision. And I think that was really lovely. And Monica's very excited. And, well, Phoebe kind of gives Rachel a look as if to say, now you have to deal with that. And Rachel points out, yeah, but she's going to be your maid of honour. Whether or not that happens, I won't say. I won't say anything about that. But it's a really solid episode. Personal highlights would have to include, I guess, just Joey and Ross. I enjoyed that story a lot. The hypothetical scenarios and how they played out, I really enjoyed those. And the words that Chandler said to Monica as we concluded their part of the story. Really solid episode. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. The one with the nap partners is, needless to say, a pretty great episode of Friends.